All right, everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Chamber Podcast. My name is Rob Johnson, and joining me in the studio today is Greg Barbee, Simplify Estate Planning. Welcome, sir.
Nice to be here. Thanks, Rob.
So, Greg, I know this is your first podcast, so I'll do my absolute best to take it easy on you. So I guess just for the listeners, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then why you got into practicing law?
Okay. So I was licensed in 2007 and, started working for myself. I kind of always wanted to build my own practice. And, when you build your own practice, you take a lot of different areas of law. It's probably when you're the most dangerous coming out of law school, knowing all the areas that they make you learn. And then, through trial and error, you take a bunch of cases, you see what you like, I don't say what you don't like, but what you're more interested in and where you're helping people the most. And for about the last 15 going on 16 years, I've just been practicing certain areas and started gravitating towards estate planning and helping people out. I saw the need for it, and it's not the most the easiest thing for people to talk about, because you're planning your own demise, basically your own death. And so, you try to present it in a friendly way where, people will open up and once they open up, you kind of know what you're planning and trying to help people out.
A friend of mine is an estate planning attorney, and I asked him when we first started to get to know each other, I said, do you find that people put off planning their estate because they think they're going to die as soon as that paperwork is signed? Do you find that to be the case with people, as there's so much anxiety and fear over doing it, so they just keep tabling it and putting it off?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But what also goes along with that is once somebody has contacted me and we've started preparing, because usually what we'll do is, an intake where either I meet with them or we talk on the phone and, they're asking, hey, this is what I'd like to have happen. Is this possible? We go over everything. So up until that point, most of the time people will say, yeah, I just never wanted to get to it, or it's just something I've wanted to do, but it's been, 5-10 years and time just slides by. But once they've contacted me, then it flips and it's like, Greg, do you have that done yet? Because what happens if I die now? And I've started the process, but I haven't signed it. So yes, there's not a huge urgency in the beginning. And then once we start, people usually want me to draft it and have it signed as soon as possible. Yeah. That's definitely nobody likes to think about their own death. Or the flip side is, unfortunately, if somebody has passed in your family, mom, dad, or you were left as the personal representative or trustee of the trust, the person has to gather the assets. If the person that that has passed did not have estate documents and it wasn't properly planned, then that person contacts me quite a bit too, to say, hey, I don't want to leave my trustee or my personal representative or my family or my wife or my brother or my sister in the situation of having to find out what I have, what I don't have. So once somebody has gone through that, and believe me, it's a tough process, it's expensive, they usually will seek me out at that point and say, listen, I can't have this happen. I need to be prepared.
Yeah. So with that, if you had kind of a megaphone to the world and you could tell everyone one thing that they should know about estate planning, would it be the preparation side? Like, what would you tell people that they ought to know when it comes to planning, for their end of life?
It would definitely be that we can do anything that you want to have happen, whatever your wishes are, as far as how you want to leave the money. If you want to set up, leave some money to charity, leave some money to, neighbors, friends, your family, obviously probably the most important, your spouse. I think people, when you pull the curtain back for the individual, everybody that sits with me or talks to me on the phone, you always are intimidated. Oh, I'm going to see an attorney and I don't know anything about this. But what I like to do is break it down and, hence the name, simplify estate planning. We like to keep it simple and explain exactly what it is. So by the end of it, I tell every one of my clients, if you give me an hour, by the end of that hour, you will know everything you need to know about estate planning, and you'll be able to tell me what you want me to draft, as opposed to me telling you, hey, this is a cookie cutter, this is what you have to have.
Yeah. What I found most interesting about this particular industry is all of the things that you don't necessarily think about that are absolutely critical to be included in the plan. Another thing a friend and I were talking about was pets. Like, if you have pets, who takes care of them when you die, and how do you allocate money for that? And that should be a part of your estate plan. So there's a lot of different divisions in estate planning that you just don't think about. And that's kind of the benefit of having an expert walking you through those paces.
No doubt. You should definitely, again, and just meeting with myself, it doesn't mean, sometimes we have multiple meetings, but that's why we like to set aside at least an hour to go over everything. But you're absolutely correct. If you have one pet or two pets, anybody that has pets, understand how expensive it is. I've had 2 ACL surgeries on my dog in the last 3 years, so I get it. You're going to leave somebody.
Is he out there shooting those threes, or what's he doing?
Yeah. Full disclosure, we paid for the surgeries, but yeah, it's expensive. So what you want to do is, most people in that situation, and again, it's never a cookie cutter way of doing it, but most people in that situation I'll talk to them. You know what? Well, how much do you think it costs? Let's run through your bills for your pets. Okay, do you want to leave $5,000, $10,000 every year for this person as long as the pet's alive? And then typically they want to leave, money for that person, because listen, everybody's busy nowadays, and to leave a pet or two with somebody, it's one thing to pay for the pets and, their food, their medicine, whatever it may need, but it's another thing to have that person take their time. And I'm sure they, you have a great relationship with them and they love you, whether it's a family or a neighbor or a friend, but you also should be compensating them slightly. Sometimes they won't take it, but it's a nice gesture to do. Hey, you're going to be taking them to the vet. You're going to be doing this. So yeah, there's a lot of things to do, and we can do all of that. People automatically assume spouses and children, but people have great relationships with their nieces, nephews, neighbors. So again, the message I always leave is, you tell me what you want to do, and we'll find a way to be able to do it.
Okay. So as you kind of look forward to next year, is there anything major that's changing in estate planning that people ought to be aware of, or things that people should keep in mind as we're nearing year end and heading into a new year?
Not typically. The nice thing that's been happening the last 7-8 years is the estate tax has been, the death tax, people call it, has been rising every year. For a married couple, it's over $22 million now. So, if you haven't had, one of the big things I hear from a lot of people is, I don't want the government to get my money, or I don't want, with that estate tax, let's just being honest, I know I'm not most people aren't anywhere near that number. So, but we can help people who are, and who are under it, over it. But the point being is, if you don't do anything, then that's when people worry about, well, I don't want the money to go to to the state. Well, if you don't have anything prepared, right, and you pass away, and you don't have you're not married, and you don't have children, that's when they start looking for brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews. So, I get why people are afraid to talk about it, and I get why people are nervous and they don't really understand it. But just meeting with someone like myself doesn't mean we're going to have to do anything, but at least you'll get the information, and I know you'll feel better about it, even if you end up putting it off a little bit longer.
Yeah. I think again, this is one of those things where I think a lot of people in their minds, they want to take this DIY approach. They just want to go and do it themselves, and they'll write something, put it in the safe, but that's not exactly an estate plan. We've had, on this particular show, we've had funeral directors come in and talk about the benefits of funeral directors working with estate planning attorneys to make sure that, like, when you do die, everything is in place for your family, and it's less for you and more for them. And I've personally seen family members have to go through probate and what that looks like. And if they would have just taken, less than 4 hours to sit down and think about this, I don't know how long it exactly takes, but just a little bit of time could have prevented so much headache for everyone else and so much infighting and all of that. I was going to ask you one other thing. If you had to kind of summarize the mission of Simplify, what would you say?
Yeah, I could do, piggybacking off what you just said,
absolutely.
Is, you mentioned 4 hours. They do not have to meet with me for anywhere near that. If they need to, they're more than welcome. Yeah. But usually if you meet with me, we gather some information ahead of time. In an intake, we ask them some information to fill out. So I know going into the meeting, hey, that intake probably take a half hour, 45 minutes to fill out. And then we meet with them, whether in person or on the phone, or even via Zoom if we have to. I know that's popular now. So honestly, the intake, the initial meeting with me, usually an hour. Like I said, sometimes it's 45 minutes, but we cover a lot of ground in that meeting. And then typically if we need to follow up, if I've really triggered something in them, giving them something else to think about. They may come back in a couple weeks and we may have an intake. And, but if usually then we have the signing, and that's 45 minutes to an hour, but the whole process getting to what you were saying, that's where the name came from, Simplify Estate Planning. And we just want to make it simple and approachable for people. We want to treat the customer or the client right and explain that, listen, you're not just going to get jammed into something that doesn't fit you or your lifestyle or your family's lifestyle. You're going to get something and you're going to understand it. Trust me, you will understand it. Most people don't believe me, but when they walk out, they're like, yes, that makes perfect sense to me now. So that's the whole process. And then, as you said, what we like to call is a default estate plan, when somebody doesn't do something, or they have 3 children, and I just put my son on the house and all my bank accounts, and then he'll give the money to the other children. Yeah. And just so people know, I'm not giving legal advice here on the podcast, but that's a problem. If that child gets put on something, they legally own that upon the death of the survivor, if it's a mom or dad. And then that leads to a lot of fights.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong with that?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the last thing I heard. My children will never fight over money. And unfortunately, I don't think it's money that they're fighting over, or love, that somebody loved them more. I think it's just some mistrust that gets involved at that point. So again, we can avoid all of that. Yeah. Keep it simple. Let what you want to have happen. We'll make sure it happens.
Yeah. People want to be in that power seat when someone dies for whatever reason. It's weird.
They do. They absolutely do. And one of the things that I have a lot is, if let's just say you have 2 children, or you have 4 children, and I could even ask you this and you would know the answer. Who do people name? And I'll answer it, but as their personal rep or their trustee, they always name the oldest child. No matter what the experience is, you could have a financial advisor who's the middle child. You could have an attorney who's the youngest child. And the parents always feel like they have to name the oldest child because they're the one responsible for the family. And again, maybe that's the appropriate person to name, but those are things that we discuss, like who lives in state, who lives out of state, who's, I hate to say this, more responsible. So all those
just
things.
It's just a fact, like who is going to do the better job?
That's right.
Or who's going to do the best job at executing the wishes of their parents or whomever it might be.
That's exactly right. Yes. So that's where Simplify Estate Planning came from, was just keep it simple, keep it, keep everybody in the loop, and make the process less intimidating.
Yeah. I love it. So Greg, any final thoughts before we wrap up here today?
No, not really. Just, again, I will tell you that people do put it off, and I know it's an unpleasant thought to think about. But the other thing I will mention is, everybody who gets it done, the relief that they feel after their documents are completed, it dwarfs the fear that they had ahead of time of, I don't want to do it because I don't want to think about death. Once it's completed, you'll feel a lot better about yourself, and we'll hold your hand through the whole process.
I love it. Well, Greg, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for walking me through all that.
I know. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Chamber Podcast. I appreciate you all watching, listening, wherever you're at. You can find all of the info about Greg and Simplify Estate Planning in the show notes. If you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or the Chamber. Contact information is in there as well. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care.